Good morning, everyone. Thanks for your patience. Welcome to our monthly Mornings with O'Keeffe program. I'm Katrina Latka. I'm the Curator of Education and Interpretation here at the O'Keeffe Museum. I would like to begin by recognizing the lands of the Pueblo people on which the sites of the O'Keeffe Museum stand. We recognize and honor their elders, past and present, and celebrate the vitality of their people today and into future generations. I offer this with humility and gratitude in acknowledgement of the need to confront the ongoing injustices of settler colonialism. I would like to extend a thank you to our members and our donors who are here with us today, and your support made this event possible. If you're not yet a member and enjoy this program, please consider joining today. Please visit gokm.org/membership to learn more. Live captioning is not yet working today, so please visit the recording, which will be available on our website in about 1 week. Throughout this talk, please place your questions in the chat, which can be found at the bottom or top of your screen, depending on your device. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. It is now my pleasure to introduce our presenter this morning, Cristina Salvador. Cristina has been with the Santa Fe Botanical Gardens since 2010 and oversees its nonprofit operations and partnerships, along with management of the living collections. Her professional interests include equitable access to nature and wild places, interdisciplinary science and arts, and sustainable development during this time of climate change. She has degrees in biology and a master's of science from Stanford University, focused in plant ecology and evolution. So without further ado, Cristina Salvador. Cristina, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Katrina, and thanks to everybody who's here. It's really fun to see in the chat all of the amazing places that everybody's joining us here from today. So let me go ahead and share my screen. We can get started. Here. Okay, so thanks to the O'Keeffe Museum. It's my pleasure to be here this morning and presenting about a topic that is very near and dear to me, the plants that grow around us here in our very wild and unique New Mexico landscape, and also the cultivated gardens where we are practicing horticulture and the care of these species and also care of the land. When I was invited by the museum to give a talk on native plants, I first thought about, well, there's quite a few native plants in the paintings of O'Keeffe, so why not start there? I had always thought about that idea, but this gave me an opportunity to really dive in, and so it's been really fun. I decided to draw inspiration for this talk from the artist's own approach to looking at the subject and also her relationship with her surroundings. So I will be using examples of her artwork as jumping off points to discussion about specific plants, groups of plants, and communities and landscapes. So let's begin. 1 second. Okay. So I just first want to do a little introduction about where I work, the Santa Fe Botanical Garden, which I think some of the audience is familiar with, and that's really nice to see that you visited. This is a garden that started 35 years ago, it's our anniversary year, by a small group of passionate founders that were called themselves Dreamers. And the mission is centered around botanical and also cultural heritage diversity of this region. We are located in an area about in Santa Fe called Museum Hill, and it's a little southeast of historic downtown, nestled in a pinyon juniper woodland landscape. The garden has 3 main areas. There's an orchard garden that has an orchard, a fruit orchard, colorful ornamental plantings throughout perennial borders, roses, lavenders, a beautiful xeric meadow, and other xeric plantings. The middle photo that you see on your screen is an area we call Ojos y Manos, Eyes and Hands, which is an ethnobotanical garden featuring raised beds for annual crops and an extensive collection of plants with traditional uses. And then The bottom is our most recently opened area called the Pinyon Juniper Woodland. And this is a natural area showcasing native plants and habitat for birds and insects. And throughout the 12 years that I've been with the garden, it has always been full of change and growth. And it's just a wonderful aspect of working here. But gardening in New Mexico presents a lot of challenges, which we'll address today. And so it's a privilege to be here and sharing knowledge with the public and students and people who are coming here to enjoy and learn. Sorry. So I wanted to open with this quote because when I read it, it really struck me as a great starting off point. When she shared this about her perspective, I really think that she opened the eyes of the whole world about looking at flowers and subjects really up close. Her scale was incredible. And she knew that the flowers were small and low to the ground, and in comparison with the vastness of New Mexico, really could be something that was overlooked because of just like passing by and how perhaps like hard they are to notice. And what I really thought is like when you take the time to notice them, you can really see the unique characteristics and the stories behind the plants and the people that have relationship with these plants and have been using them for centuries. And so her approach when she was developing her artwork is not that much different than a lot of naturalists and botanists and ecologists. She's seen here in this photograph, hiking with her camera, and many of us go into nature in the same way. And while we are there, we observe and we record what we see and we hear, but we also disconnect and we slow down and we go off the grid and we eliminate that noise and we reconnect with the air and the light and the wind and the trees. And we see the animals and what they're doing. And maybe we collect things like bones as she did. We simultaneously look inward and learn about ourselves. And we also learn about the environment around us. And so in my own work, I follow her advice and I look very closely. As a plant ecologist, I do go out into the field and I, of course, carry my camera. I carry notebooks to make sketches as well. I don't think of them as artistic, but I do try to get as many details as possible. And I carry a GPS. I want to know my location, and I sometimes collect the plants and dry them for later study or to deposit in a herbarium. We then also bring these plants into cultivation in the botanical garden, and that allows us an opportunity to watch them grow over time and learn more about the horticulture. We do this much like a museum for the purpose of making them accessible to the public, to research, and to artists. And then we're also just incredibly stunned by the beauty of the biodiversity that we can grow in small cultivated areas. I appreciate that the museums today, like the O'Keeffe Museum, have made their collections available online. And it is just fascinating to explore and study from home. And I encourage you all to visit their online collections and use the filters and explore different types of paintings such as this. I had filtered it for flowers, and I've also filtered it for landscapes. And it's just a really great way to dive into see amazing collections of work. And so I hope that Katrina can share that link. Otherwise, we can probably put it in later. And then similarly, the Botanical Garden offers their plant collections online. And we also include tours. And this is all through a website where the address is on there. It's called the Garden Explorer. And I have a QR code where you can maybe hold up something and capture that code and go directly to the site. We share the names of the plants in English and in Spanish, and sometimes additional languages if we've researched that. But we also explain the habitats that they grow in, the growing conditions required to cultivate them, and we have many additional photos that we've collected since we have direct access to them all the time, and a map of where it is located in the garden to make it easy to find that plant when you come and visit. We've designed thematic tours, such as on special groups of plants or plants that we really want to tell a longer story about. And we have even tours on New Mexico native plants. And so I encourage you to go there and read through some of those tours. And so I want to dive in first and look at the bigger picture and some context on native New Mexico plants. And this is a map that I have in my office right behind me. And it is actually very beautiful to look at. And with all of its colors and shapes and chaos, it's almost like a piece of artwork itself. And it's easy to see that there's a wide range of habitat diversity. And New Mexico as a landscape is really full of extremes. So we have a wide range of temperatures as known in this arid climate. And we have a wide range of precipitation, and such as in Santa Fe, I think it's around, about 10 inches of rain a year, but in other parts of New Mexico, it can be much lower. And that's low in comparison to a lot of areas. And then we also have quite a big range of elevation. So throughout that extreme diversity of landscape, we have nearly around 4,000 native plant species. And it actually makes New Mexico the fourth highest native species richness of any US state. And so I want you to notice on this map, I won't go over every little color, but the large area on the right, that's the light color, that would be the Plains Mesa grassland. The orange colors that kind of come up through the bottom are desert grassland. And then the darker colors near the top are gonna designate the coniferous and mixed woodlands. And then the juniper savanna is the light green. And so those are like the top large areas that you can notice right away. And then there's a bunch of smaller areas. So I've zoomed in to the area of land around the Abiquiu area, and I've marked that with a star. And I've also marked the vegetation type around where Ghost Ranch is. And so that area is called a juniper savanna ecotone. And an ecotone, just to give you a little bit of background, is a region of transition between two biological communities. So it's a middle elevation landscape, and it contains foothills and mesas. And the plant communities at higher elevations from that are the coniferous mixed woodlands. And it's usually dominated by the ponderosa pine. And then slightly lower from the juniper savanna is what would be the desert grassland. And so you can see that the light green throughout this map is pretty extensive. I mean, that's a pretty wide transition. And so it's not uniform, it's definitely a mosaic. And within that mosaic, you will find patches of grasslands and woodlands and forests and shrublands. But the most common tree species will be a juniper tree. So in this photo of a juniper savanna taken by Patrick Alexander, who's an incredible botanist and photographer, you will see scattered stands with densities of less than 130 trees per acre, which is what defines the juniper savanna. Once that tree density increases to about 280 trees per acre, it becomes a woodland. And so if you look closely and that consider that over long amounts of time, there is a change across these landscapes. Sometimes in areas like this where there have been grazing, there is a reduction in grasses. There's also fire suppression in a lot of these areas. And so these scattered juniper trees actually can more easily establish, and they spread into woodlands. And they have a higher tree density over time. And this is actually happening quite commonly. And they also expand upslope right now due to warming of the climate. So later on in the talk, we'll come back to this landscape and talk about some of the more significant changes. I wanted to just include a little bit more of her artwork just because it's so beautiful, and you can see this juniper savanna. And here you can obviously see there's less detail about the vegetation, but if you do have a chance to visit Ghost Ranch, I highly recommend looking closely at the grasses that are all blended in the foreground. Native grasses in New Mexico have an incredible amount of diversity of shape and color, texture, and they change dramatically throughout the seasons. So they are stunning, and I won't be talking about grasses specifically here, but I definitely think you should look down and look at them. I'd also think it's important to note that this land is very culturally diverse, that there have been people living here for millennia. And in New Mexico, we have 19 distinct pueblos and 3 reservations. And the indigenous people here, including the settlers of the Spanish explorers that came 450 years ago, brought with them rich traditions about how they use plants. And so it's no surprise that culturally important plants and sites made their way into her artwork. The first group of plants that I'm going to share with you belong to the genus Oenothera. And so I included a way of pronouncing this name because it's a little bit difficult when you just look at the spelling. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about diversity and adaptation. And the common name is evening primrose. And if you are looking for more about these plants in the paintings, I would definitely recommend that you turn to the museum resources, to understand the background of the life and work of O'Keeffe, because really they're the experts in the art, and I won't be talking about as much of the context of the art itself. Here you can see the museum director, Cody Hartley. They have a wonderful video online where he talks about this painting called Spring, and he reveals so much more about her life and events and the symbols in the painting and the ideas that are presented through that artwork. And so definitely want to recognize that I'm not going to cover that because I am definitely, captivated by the work, but I'm drawn to those plants that I see there. And I noticed the flower in spring, and I wanted to know what it was, and I recognized it as Oenothera, and I had a strong hunch that it was a native species, and so I wanted to see if I could figure that out. So I looked even closer, and I started to notice things, and I kind of wondered if it was in line with some of her other techniques of making things abstract. And so I looked at the shape of the petals and the parts of the flower in the center, and I kind of wondered, is that exaggerated in size? They look kind of perfectly heart-shaped, and that color, I just thought, is this some other sort of adjustment? And also the size of the center just seemed so large, those parts in there, that I didn't think maybe nature would do that for no purpose, because that's not really what happens. So I wanted to know what is the purpose and what's really going on. So I delved a little deeper and looked throughout to see if I could find this specific flower repeated and what other details was she capturing. And this painting, White Primrose, you can see 2 flowers, and you get a side view of that flower at the bottom. And in the center, there are very prominent anthers and pistil parts appearing again, and the vivid color is dramatic against those white petals. So I also caught at the bottom, which might be hard to see on the screen, a little bit of a blush of pink along the bottom petal on the underneath part at the bottom of the painting. And then I looked at one more painting, and there's probably others that had really quite a lot of detail, and it could be identified down to the species because of the inclusion of the leaf at the side. And you could see that the leaf has serrated edges. And in this one, the answers are very sharply defined, and there is that green stigma that is coming off the lower left, and it had an unusual number of parts. I was sort of looking at that like, oh, there's like a lot of different extensions going on there. And I discovered later that's a key characteristic. So let's meet the actual plant. So even though Oenothera's common name is evening primrose, it is neither a primrose, which would be in the Primulaceae family, or a rose, which is the Rosaceae family. It is a genus in the, it's the second largest genus in the Oenograceae family with 145 species. And the name Oenothera, sometimes you can learn from the names quite a bit about the plants. And there's a little bit of, I don't know, there's not a lot of clarity about the name, but it could be from Greek, from oinos and theros, which is wine seeker, and cespitosa translates in Latin to growing in tufts or in dense clumps. And this genus, specifically this plant, Oenothera cespitosa, is widely distributed in temperate to sort of subtropical regions, and it is usually in open, often disturbed habitats, and it can exist from sea level to nearly 5,000 meters elevation, and it is also widely naturalist. And the center of diversity for this genus is in southwestern North America. And so here's a map just displaying the range of this one species, and is likely the species that is appearing in her paintings. If you look closely and sort of pay attention to other parts of the plant other than the flowers, you can learn a lot about adaptation and of diversity. So these fuzzy lance-shaped leaves sometimes have wavy lobes or toothed edges and are clustered together in that rosette at the very ground level. And the adaptations to the arid and extreme climate are evident if you look up close and notice all of the hairs that are covering it, which are insulating the leaves and protecting them from the heat and the cold. The silvery white color on the leaf is reflecting sunlight, and it's helping keep the plant cool. The hairs also are helping trap any moisture and reducing the amount of water loss. The flowers are solitary or few in number, and they have 4 separate sepals hanging behind the white 4 heart-shaped petals. So you can see that here on the backside view. And the flowers open at dusk and they close in early morning. And they fade into a pink or a lavender color, which is what you can see in the background of the photo on the right, and what was also noticeable in her painting. So I thought that was a cool detail to bring out. And here you can really look at the botany of the plant and see that the pistil at the top, which is hanging down kind of on the bottom right, has a deeply divided 4-lobe stigma. And that is a characteristic of this genus. And it was accurate to size. The fragrant flowers have a moderate to strong, sweet, and somewhat rubbery odor. And they open at night, and they're very bright white, and they make them more visible for pollinators. And this plant is pollinated by a night-flying hawk moth. And the hawk moth is looking for nectar, and it can actually reach down into the long floral tube of that pistil, and it can be up to 16 centimeters long, and it uses its proboscis to get to the nectar, and which is an incredible sort of relationship between the plant and the pollinator, which has been sort of developing through time and has evolved together. Let's see here. So there is research that is showing that the hawk moth is probably detecting many things, but in order to know if there's nectar or not, it could be possibly detecting changes in humidity level coming from the nectar evaporating slightly. And that's a unique form of sense that there's still research being going on. And it's just a fascinating plant to look at. And here is a picture of the hawk moth pollinating it. The beauty of a botanical garden is that we can collect a diverse amount of species of this genus in the garden, and we have them featured for display to be studied and to be appreciated for their beauty. I really enjoy the fact that we can so easily access these plants throughout the year, and then develop more knowledge about the horticulture, but also watch their pollination and sort of make more observations about them. We grow these plants and create habitat with other native species and conditions that they thrive in. And here you can see that the plant is located in very dry conditions next to a four-wing saltbush shrub down there low to the ground. It's fairly dry, low water. And it can also be combined with other native perennials as seen with these penstemons in the right photo. And I think it's just a great example of how you can plant with species of Oenothera or other native perennials and shrubs in patches and in gardens and throughout the landscape, and you actually are creating habitat and corridors for pollinators. These are all species that are included right now in a pollinator habitat kit from the Xerces Society. And if you live in Santa Fe, you can look up and fill out an interest form to receive a kit and plant in your own home garden. And so if Katrina can, I gave her a link to this form, and I encourage you to fill out an interest form and receive one of these kits. The next plant that we're going to look at is Datura and talk about sacred plant stories. In her artwork, this is called Jimson weed. It is one of its common names, but it has other common names that are known as sacred thornapple, devil's snare, or angel's trumpet. And there's a lot of information about these paintings from the art perspective and its history. And it's really become one of her most famous. And I selected this plant to talk about today just because of how impressive it was, how closely it represented to the plant itself. Here I show Datura anoxia, but Datura, there's several species growing in New Mexico, and some are native and some are not. And so I wanted just to address that it is found throughout the landscape and some are going to be considered native, but they all kind of have a resemblance in appearance. And it has a very large trumpet-shaped white corolla, and it blooms also in the cool evening hours, and it unfurls and it then withers by the next morning. It is also has a foul smell and it is poisonous, and all parts of the plant are toxic. It is in the Solanaceae family, which is also called the nightshade family. The plant here, you can see the seed pod, which has a very unique and unusual look, produces a large amount of seeds, and these seeds can remain viable for 30 years. And it can be invasive in some environments. And so we grow this plant in an area of the garden that I referenced before, our ethnobotanical area. And this area is designed to provide hands-on experiences and observation of culturally important plants. The plants that grow here have been used by cultures in New Mexico for food and medicine and tools and art. And this exhibit has been recognized for how well it's been done. And a lot of the credit goes to our former education director, Molly Parsons, who was able to put together incredible signage and interpretation, but also an audio tour with stories directly from people. So there's a QR code here where you could also access these stories in this app, or we can try to put that in a link. And so you can learn more from people using these plants. And I want to show this example of a story that features Datura. And it's coming from a person who directly has used this plant, Catherine Garcia. And she talks about her experience using the plant medicinally for pain and arthritis and muscle aches. But she does acknowledge that it's poisonous. And there's a deep respect for the plant and for that knowledge and the people and the healers that hold this wisdom and pass it down from generation to generation. These stories they share are important in understanding the many different cultures and practices that are part of this land and in coexistence with these plants. So finally, I want to come to the story of juniper. And this is a tree that we saw earlier in the presentation. And I call this the changing landscape story. And so it's partly about juniper, it's partly about trees in general in New Mexico. So in paintings such as Hill, New Mexico, the trees appear very sparse. There's, glimpses of green, but there's also really the main feature is the soil and the color of the rock and the ground. And you can just see at the bottom, there's a few that look like they have some bare branches. However, in these two paintings, the trees have very barren branches and they are dead. And there's not really, obviously it wasn't painted with a reason why they're dead, but it is still beautiful to see that the shape and the color and how much feeling is evoked from seeing these trees. And I just want to jump off from looking at these trees and start thinking about what we are seeing right now in our landscape and what we are noticing with dead and dying trees. And in some of her work, she does reference cedar trees. And I wanted to say that if you have a chance to see work and she says cedar tree, it is also a juniper tree. It's just a confusion of the common name. So our this view of the garden here is, you can see our pinyon juniper woodland, and it has a higher density of trees than the savanna, and it's a little bit over 3 acres in size on Museum Hill, and it's been left largely in its natural state. This type of woodland exists across the entire West, over 100 million acres. And in New Mexico, it compromises about half of the forests and has always been very important to the people and the ecosystem, including birds and insects. The pinon seeds and juniper berries have been highly nutritious and provide proteins and nutrition and vitamins and minerals to everyone that lives among these plants. And in this photo, you are seeing a dead and dying pinon pine. It's a very slow growing tree. It can live hundreds of years, and it usually doesn't get any higher than 25 feet. But under extreme prolonged drought, which is what we're experiencing right now, it can be attacked by insects and it can be killed. These warmer and drier conditions have made this significantly worse, and we are seeing many more of these dead trees. And so I wanted to note that in April, we had almost no precipitation, and this is a very intense multi-year drought with below average precipitation and high temperatures. And it is projected to be persistent. It's quite historic and widespread, and these effects of these drought are going to continue to intensify for our region. And it's been a really difficult week or month, actually, for New Mexico to even think about native forests. Right now, across, as you have heard in the news, there is the biggest fire in the country, and it's occurring in the Ponderosa pine forests. And it really is concerning for all of us what that forest will be like for decades to come, if not centuries, in terms of recovery. Extremely low moisture in the soils and the vegetation, and low humidity have just caused these wildfires to be very difficult to prevent and contain, especially during the strong windy seasons that we're going through right now. It is relatively early in the season, and so that is making it even more a dire situation that is ahead of us. And so we really just think about all the people and the firefighters and everybody right now combating these horrific fires. And I also just want to point out that prolonged drought affects communities and cities and states and requires taking really harsh measures such as water restrictions. And so what that means for us is, like, we have to keep in mind at all times how we are using water and thinking about how to be more drought tolerant and more water wise, and harvesting the rain and capturing every drop in order to live in this landscape and keep it, alive with life and not void. So I just wanted to show sort of what it looks like right now with all these fires and smoke, just looking out across here in Santa Fe, for anyone who doesn't live here. And this is just a view on a recent morning around this time. And this was a view not long ago with our clear skies and, looking east over the hills here by the Botanical Garden. And I just wanted to end with this and say that we are remaining hopeful in what we can do together and how we can learn more about how to take care of this land and be good stewards, honor it, and hopefully give back to the land and face these challenges that we are faced with today. I just have 2 more slides. I wanted to share with anyone who is a member of the garden or of the O'Keeffe Museum that we are having a member swap weekend coming up. And if you want more information, it's on our website, and there's details about how you can visit. And then my final slide is a story about how artists and people still are, studying these plants and looking at them very closely. This is Wren Allen. She's a local botanical artist, and she comes to the garden and uses our collection to work on an illustration of the Santa Fe cholla, which is an endangered endemic species. And fortunately, even though it's endangered, it is in cultivation and is part of restoration programs here. So through her art, we hope to share a unique story about this species and raise awareness about conservation of rare, threatened, and endangered native plants, habitats, and ecosystems. And so I end with an invitation and inspiration to come to the garden and look closely for yourself and find plants that have meaning to you and make you curious about the environment around you. And that's it.
Christina, thank you so much for such a wonderful, informative presentation. I mean, I'm from New Mexico now, and know that I learned so much from the things that you told us. Folks from the chat said the same, that they're from the state and learned so many things from what you said. So we did have a few questions that came in that I wanted to share. So for example, the folks that mentioned that they were from New Mexico said, for example, that they were surprised to learn about that there were different types of datura, for example. And, is there anything that you can tell us about ways to tell them apart from one another?
That is a very good question. So the best places to look are in a book called the Flora Neo-Mexicana. It was written by botanists here in the state, and it lists every species that is recorded growing in the state. And so there's a section on datura, and it actually gives the specific differences of each plant. We don't have all the species of datura listed on our collections online because we don't grow them all, but I turned to that. And if you Google Flora Neo-Mexicana, I believe you can find digital downloads of it. Otherwise, the other good place to, because I don't know off the top of my head the differences in the leaf or maybe the flower size, or even sometimes it comes down to like the seed pod. So you can look also on a website called SciNet. I think it's through the University of Arizona. And they have a great search tool where you can look up a plant, and there's several species of datura, and you can read the specific differences. So yeah, that's a good question.
Great. And very specifically, someone asked, does the primrose bloom in spring only?
No, I've seen it blooming kind of later into summer. We'll see, because of drought, such as this year, a lot of plants we've noticed are a little bit slower to the season, let's say. I think they're holding back a little. So it can depend on rainfall throughout the rest of the summer, such as during our monsoon season. But we do approximately say, I think it blooms spring and summer. And it might depend on species. And since there's so many species of the primrose in this area, you might find them blooming at different times.
And very early on in your presentation, you had this wonderful image of that New Mexico vegetation map. Someone asked if you sell it in your shop.
Oh, we don't. So that map is beautiful, and I think I put who and I don't know where that comes from, but in the slide, and I think I have the creator of the map, and I should find out, and maybe we should sell it in our gift shop.
That'd be a good lead. Are there any programs at the garden that you'd like to share with us?
Yes, so this Friday is our community day. Anyone in Santa Fe, if you're a native New Mexico resident, it will be free. It's also free to students. And it's a part of a wider program called Go Gardens through the American Public Garden Association. And so if you look up your local botanical garden, if you're not here in Santa Fe, there are programs coming up between May 6th and 10th, I think, and many of them include free admission or discounts or special programs. So definitely visit your gardens in the next few days if you're not busy working in your garden right now, which is what a lot of us are doing.
Well, we'll definitely have to check that out, those of us who are here in the area. There's so many wonderful questions here in the chat. I'm trying to dig through some that you can address specifically. Which native species are the most drought tolerant and would be likely to grow in our gardens here locally?
I would say the extremely xeric plants would be your cacti and succulents. We have an area of garden called the dry garden where a lot of our cactus collection is, and we don't have to irrigate it once the plant is established. And so they can go through long periods of no precipitation. And so that's what comes to mind right now. I would say start with succulents if you really want to go the driest.
I would say the ones that thrive on neglect are the ones that I could probably handle then. That's the ones that I probably wouldn't be able to kill. You pointed out a dead pinon. What are other big changes that we're seeing in the New Mexico vegetation due to climate change?
Okay, so definitely the pinon trees that are being affected by needle scale and different bark beetles, and those are dying. But that sort of creates an opportunity for more juniper to move in. And I think, like I said before, we are noticing that our hardiness zones are changing. And so I would say that plants that maybe were not before able to exist and thrive in Santa Fe, maybe that come from lower elevations or more southern, these are the plants that are now becoming available and can be planted here and maybe should be. So we look at these plants and start considering planting them here because they might require less water or they might be better adapted for the climate that is coming. So that is some sort of change that you might see. So you really would want to pay close attention to the hardiness zones, and we're planting for a little bit of a warmer climate already.
Well, something very important to kind of take away. And I guess maybe to end on, thank you so much for mentioning the wildfires that are impacting us all here, and certainly that's in the hearts and minds of everyone who's here locally, and we're certainly all thinking about those who are impacted by those. So thank you again, Christina, for your time and your wonderful presentation. And thank you all, everyone, for joining us. Have a great day, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.